Chosen one, are you ready? The time has come. God is calling you, and the mission you are about to embark on will change everything. This isn't just about your future, this is about merging with the source of all life. Are you prepared to embrace your true purpose? You felt it, haven't you? That pull deep inside, the whisper in your soul that you could never fully understand but always knew was there. It's like a force that keeps you moving forward, even when the road ahead feels uncertain, even when the world around you is trying to hold you back. For as long as you can remember, you felt different. Not because you want to be, but because something inside you is stirring. Something much greater than anything you could have ever imagined. And now, it's time to face the truth. You've always had this feeling, this deep-rooted knowing that there was something bigger for you, something that transcends the mundane struggles of everyday life. But it hasn't been easy, has it? There have been days when doubt clouds your mind, when you question if this is all there is. You've struggled, you've stumbled, and you've faced moments of confusion. There's been no clear path, no instruction manual for how to navigate the heaviness of your calling. But here you are, standing on the edge of something monumental, something that will change the course of your life forever. Maybe you've had moments where you felt completely lost, unsure if you were ever going to find your way. You've fought battles, internal and external, that have made you question your worth, your strength, and your place in this world. And yet, despite all the confusion and the obstacles, there's been this unwavering voice inside of you telling you, you are meant for more. You are being called for something great. And here's the truth. That feeling, that calling, it's not a coincidence. It's not just your imagination. It's real. You have been chosen for a divine mission, one that will stretch your faith and your understanding of the world. This mission is bigger than you ever thought possible. It's not just about achieving success or finding happiness. It's about stepping into your true identity, connecting with the very source of life, and fulfilling a purpose that only you can complete. This isn't some far-off dream. This is happening right now. The time is now. God is calling you to merge with the source, to align your spirit with the divine energy that flows through all things. And when you do, you'll realize that you are not just an ordinary person. You are a vessel for something far more powerful, something that has the potential to change not just your life, but the world around you. But it won't be easy. This journey will require courage, faith, and the willingness to walk a path that may not always make sense at first. You'll have to let go of the doubts that have held you back, and trust that everything you've been through, every struggle and every setback, has prepared you for this moment. The challenges ahead will shape you, refine you, and push you toward the divine purpose you were always meant to fulfill. If you feel this call within you, don't hesitate. This is your time. This is your moment to step into your true purpose. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and join us on this journey. You're not alone. Together, we'll walk the path that leads to your divine mission. The source is calling you, and your purpose awaits. Let's begin this journey together. It was the middle of the night when it first happened. The silence of the world outside seemed to press in, making everything feel heavier. The protagonist lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, restless, as if the weight of something unknown was pulling at them. They had been feeling it for days now, a sense of unease mixed with anticipation, a feeling that something was about to change, but they couldn't put their finger on it. The air in the room shifted. Suddenly, there was a warmth that filled the space, subtle at first, but unmistakable. The protagonist sat up, heart racing, unsure if they were still dreaming or if this was something more. And then, it came. The voice. Soft, gentle, yet powerful in its presence. You are chosen. They froze, their breath caught in their throat, and for a moment, everything seemed to stand still. The voice was not an external sound, but something that resonated deep within, as though it came from the very core of their being. It wasn't a whisper, nor a loud proclamation. It was a knowing, an undeniable connection to something far greater than themselves, a divine energy that sent chills down their spine. You are meant for more. This is your moment. The time has come. The protagonist reached for the bedside lamp, their hands trembling. What was happening? Was this real? They felt a rush of emotions flood through them: fear, awe, and a deep, aching curiosity. The voice didn't offer explanations, only assurance. It wasn't just calling them to wake up, it was calling them to awaken to their true purpose. The divine mission they had always known, somewhere deep within, was now beginning to surface. They closed their eyes, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The room felt alive, charged with something inexplicable. The warmth was still there, a gentle hum in the air that felt comforting and overwhelming at the same time. In the silence that followed, their mind raced. Was this a dream? A hallucination? Or had something truly supernatural just occurred? A flood of doubts came rushing in. Am I truly chosen? The questions tumbled one after another. Why me? What am I meant to do? The protagonist's heart pounded as they tried to shake off the unsettling feeling of being marked, of being chosen for something they weren't prepared for. For as long as they could remember, they had felt like an outsider, like they didn't quite fit in with the world around them. There had been moments where they felt different, like there was something greater they were supposed to understand, something bigger they were meant to contribute. But now, with the weight of this experience upon them, the questions seemed to echo louder than ever. What if I'm just imagining things? What if I'm not worthy of this? What if this is all in my head? The doubts were like a storm cloud, darkening the certainty they had once felt. They had always been taught to question things, to stay grounded in reality, to never chase after the intangible. But here, in this moment, they were being asked to step into something that defied logic, something that demanded trust in the unseen. As the protagonist tried to make sense of it, they were overcome with a wave of vulnerability. For a brief moment, they wished for someone to explain it to them, someone to tell them they weren't crazy, that they were not alone in this. They felt small, insignificant even, like a single drop in an endless ocean, unsure of how they could possibly fulfill such a monumental calling. Who am I to be chosen for something so great? The voice returned, gentle yet unyielding. You are enough. Trust in the calling, trust in the source. The warmth in the room intensified, as though the words themselves carried a power that was undeniable. And in that moment, something shifted inside them. A spark of hope, a flicker of understanding, like the first rays of dawn breaking through the dark. They weren't alone. They weren't unworthy. This was real. The calling was real. The voice faded, leaving only the lingering sense of divine presence, and the protagonist sat in the stillness, breathing deeply. Their heart had slowed, but the questions remained. The fear, the doubt, they still lingered, but now there was something else, a new conviction. Something deep within them had stirred, something ancient, something profound. They had been chosen, and though they didn't yet understand the full extent of what that meant, they knew they couldn't ignore it. They could no longer turn away from the mission that had just been set before them. In the days that followed, the protagonist's life began to shift in subtle ways. They began to notice signs, small things that felt significant but seemed too impossible to be mere coincidences. They'd walk down the street and find a symbol, a sign that seemed to point them in the right direction. Or they'd hear a snippet of conversation that felt like a divine message meant just for them. But even as the signs grew clearer, the doubts didn't disappear. Every time they tried to step forward, a part of them hesitated. They questioned whether they were truly the chosen one, or if they were just making up stories in their head. What if I'm not worthy? What if I'm not capable of this? The protagonist wrestled with their insecurities. They were a normal person. They had a normal life. Could they really be destined for something greater? Could they truly embrace the divine mission that had been laid before them? It wasn't until they experienced a small, miraculous event that things began to click into place. One evening, while walking home, they witnessed an act of kindness, a complete stranger offering help to someone in need. The simplicity of it hit them like a bolt of lightning. It wasn't grand gestures or profound speeches that made a difference. It was the small acts of love, of connection, of helping others that mattered. In that moment, the protagonist realized something. The mission wasn't about achieving fame or power. It was about becoming a vessel for something greater, spreading love, kindness, and understanding in a world that desperately needed it. The doubts didn't vanish completely, but they were no longer the loudest voice in their mind. The protagonist felt a renewed sense of purpose, an undeniable connection to the source. They were ready to take the next step. Does this story speak to you? Do you too feel the calling, the whisper of something greater, something divine stirring within you? You too are chosen. This mission isn't just for a select few, it's for anyone who is willing to listen and step into their purpose. If this message resonates with you, don't hesitate. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and keep following to discover what happens next. Your divine mission is waiting. The days following the awakening were a blur of uncertainty and revelation. Each morning the protagonist woke with a sense of purpose, yet the path ahead remained unclear. The vision, the voice, and the calling were real, but what did they truly mean? What was the next step? How would they begin to understand this divine mission that had been placed before them? The questions were relentless, yet the answers seemed elusive, like a fog that would not lift. The weight of the responsibility was growing heavier, and the protagonist felt the quiet pull of destiny urging them forward. They had to leave behind the familiar and embark on a journey not only of physical movement, but of spiritual growth, of self-discovery, and of facing the unknown. It wasn't going to be easy, but they couldn't turn back now. It wasn't long before they encountered someone who would change everything. The encounter happened on a quiet evening, when the protagonist wandered through the outskirts of town, lost in thought. It was then that they met the traveller, an older man with a calm demeanour and an otherworldly presence that felt strangely familiar. He seemed to be waiting, almost as if he had been expecting them. "Looking for answers, aren't you?" the man asked, his voice soft but firm, as though he had known the question long before it was spoken. The protagonist hesitated, unsure of how to respond, but there was something in the man's eyes that invited trust. "Yes," they replied quietly. "I've been called, but I don't know what to do next." The man smiled knowingly and gestured for the protagonist to sit beside him on the stone bench. "The path ahead is hidden. It isn't meant to be easy to find, nor is it meant to be walked alone. The source has chosen you for a reason, but it is up to you to discover that reason. The mission that awaits you is greater than you could imagine." As they spoke, the protagonist felt a stirring in their heart, a spark of recognition. There was something in the man's words, something in his presence, that seemed to resonate deeply with them. This was the guidance they had been waiting for, the clarity they needed to begin their journey. The man was no ordinary stranger. He was a guide, a mentor who had walked the path before, and was now offering wisdom to the one who would follow in his footsteps. "Do you know what it means to merge with the source?" the man asked, his voice filled with gentle authority. The protagonist shook their head, still grappling with the idea. "I don't fully understand. I felt a connection, but I don't know how to reach it or what it truly means." The man nodded as if he expected this answer. Merging with the source is about aligning yourself with the divine energy that flows through all things. It is about understanding your true self and connecting to the greater plan that has been set before you. It is not a destination, but a journey of transformation. You will encounter obstacles along the way, but each challenge is an opportunity to grow. The protagonist listened intently, feeling the weight of the man's words sink deep into their soul. This was it. This was what they had been waiting for, even if they didn't fully understand it yet. The source was not some distant, abstract concept. It was something real, something tangible, and it was calling them to embrace it. As the man continued to speak, he revealed more about the path ahead. There will be times when you question everything, times when you doubt yourself and your mission. You will face trials that will test your faith, your strength, and your resolve. But remember this: the source is always with you. Even when you feel lost, even when the way seems unclear, you are never truly alone. The words offered comfort, but they also reminded the protagonist of the long road ahead. The trials, the challenges, they were part of the journey, but with each step they would grow stronger, more aligned with their divine purpose. The man's eyes softened as he looked at the protagonist. The path to the source is not paved in gold. It is not a smooth, easy road, but it is the only road that leads to the truth. Trust in it, trust in yourself, and trust in the divine mission that is unfolding before you." With those words, the man stood and began to walk away, his figure slowly blending into the night. The protagonist watched him for a moment, still processing everything they had just learned. They had been given the first piece of the puzzle, but there was still so much more to discover. The journey was just beginning, and with it came the understanding that there would be no turning back. As the protagonists set off on their path the next morning, the world felt both bigger and smaller at the same time. They had always felt like an outsider, never quite fitting in with the world around them. But now there was a sense of purpose, a sense of destiny that felt undeniable. They were walking a path that few others would understand, a path that would require every ounce of their strength, faith, and courage. But the path wasn't just about moving forward physically, it was about moving deeper into themselves, into their true purpose. Each step brought them closer to the divine mission they were meant to fulfill, but it also brought them face to face with their own fears and doubts. The first true test came sooner than expected. The protagonist found themselves in a small town on the outskirts of their journey, and while they were resting at a local inn, they overheard a conversation that stopped them in their tracks. A man was speaking in hushed tones to a group of travelers, describing a deal that was too good to pass up, a way to gain wealth and power. The proposition sounded tempting, easy, quick, and simple. It was a path that promised success with little effort. But something in the protagonist's gut twisted. This wasn't the way. They knew that the easy road was not the right road. This was a test, a moment where they would have to choose between what was easy and what was right. They could walk away, continue on their journey, or they could stay, fall into the temptation of instant gratification and let the mission slip from their grasp. It wasn't an easy decision. The temptation to take the shortcut, to avoid the struggle, was overwhelming. But the protagonist remembered the man's words. The path to the source is not paved in gold. The right path was the one that required patience, faith, and sacrifice. With a deep breath, the protagonist turned away from the conversation and left the inn, the weight of their decision settling in their chest. They knew the road ahead would not be easy, but it was the right road. And as they walked away, a small, quiet voice within them whispered, "You are on the right path." Do you recognize the trials in your life? These are part of the journey, the struggles, the temptations, the moments when you must choose between what is easy and what is right. They are the very things that shape you, that guide you closer to your divine mission. You too are walking your own path. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and keep following to discover what happens next. The road ahead was long, and the journey had only just begun. As the protagonist ventured deeper into the wilderness of their mission, they faced more obstacles than they had ever anticipated. The initial excitement of receiving the divine calling began to fade, replaced by the harsh reality of the challenges they were encountering. With every step, the doubts crept back in, louder and more insistent than before. Am I truly chosen for this? What if I'm not enough? There were moments when the weight of the journey felt too heavy to bear. The fatigue, both physical and spiritual, was starting to take its toll. Days would go by when nothing felt right. The path seemed unclear, the signs less frequent, and the guidance from the source, once so strong, now felt like a distant memory. It was in these moments, when the protagonist's faith was at its lowest, that they were forced to confront their deepest fears and uncertainties. The crisis came suddenly. It was a confrontation with their own sense of worth, a test of their belief in the mission they had been called to complete. They had been traveling for weeks, walking through desolate lands, when they encountered a situation that shook them to their core. They met a group of people who mocked their mission, dismissing the idea of a divine calling as naive and foolish. They laughed at the protagonist's belief, questioning the very foundation of their purpose. For the first time, the protagonist began to wonder if they had been wrong all along. Was this path, this calling, just a fantasy? Was it possible that they had been deluding themselves? Were they really chosen for something divine? Or was it all just an illusion? The doubts that had once been subtle now surged to the surface, overwhelming them with a sense of despair. In that moment of crisis, the protagonist found themselves on their knees, lost in prayer. The weight of the world felt like it was crushing them. They had never felt so alone, so uncertain. But in the silence of that prayer, something shifted. A gentle warmth washed over them, not from the outside world, but from within. It was a presence, a stillness that filled them with peace. A memory surfaced, words spoken long ago, not by a mentor or a guide, but by the quiet voice within. You are never truly alone. The source is always with you. Trust in the calling, and it will guide you through the darkness. The protagonists closed their eyes, remembering the guidance they had received early in their journey. The words weren't just an abstract idea, they were a truth, a solid foundation that they could build their life upon. They began to feel a connection to something larger than themselves, something eternal and unwavering. This was the power of faith, the strength that had carried others through their own trials, and now it was time for them to embrace it fully. As they stood up, they took a deep breath. The doubts were still there, lingering in the back of their mind, but they no longer held the power they once had. The protagonist knew now that faith wasn't about having all the answers. It was about trusting in the journey, even when the road ahead seemed uncertain. It was about believing that the source, whatever form it took, was always with them, guiding them toward their purpose. And with that belief came a renewed strength. The protagonist felt their heart begin to lighten, their spirit rising with the knowledge that they were not alone in this mission. They had been given the tools they needed, faith, trust, and the willingness to move forward even when the path wasn't clear. They began to see signs again, small miracles that confirmed they were on the right path. A flower blooming in the desert, a sudden gust of wind carrying a distant melody, a random encounter with a kind stranger who offered a word of encouragement when they needed it most. Each of these moments, though seemingly insignificant, was a sign that the protagonist was on the right path. They were not wandering aimlessly, they were being guided, step by step, toward their divine mission. As the days passed, the protagonist began to integrate this newfound faith into their daily life. They learned that prayer wasn't just about asking for help, it was about creating a space of connection, a way to align themselves with the source. They learned that stillness, meditation, and reflection weren't just practices for peace, they were tools for receiving divine guidance. In the quiet moments of prayer and solitude, the protagonist felt their connection to the source strengthen, and with it, their sense of purpose grew clearer. It wasn't always easy. There were days when the doubts returned, when the weight of the journey felt too much to bear. But each time, the protagonist leaned into their faith, trusting that they were exactly where they needed to be. They began to realize that the purpose wasn't just about the destination. It was about the process, the journey, and the transformation that took place along the way. The challenges they faced were shaping them, molding them into the person they needed to become in order to fulfill their divine mission. And then came a moment that solidified everything they had been learning. It happened during a particularly difficult trial, when everything seemed to be falling apart. The protagonist was faced with a choice that would test their very beliefs, a situation where they could take the easy road or choose the right path, which was much more difficult. The easy road promised success, but at a cost. The right path, though difficult, promised something deeper: truth, integrity, and alignment with the source. In that moment, the protagonist remembered the power of faith. They remembered the guidance they had received, the lessons they had learned, and they chose the right path. As they made their decision, they felt a wave of peace wash over them. It was as though the universe had aligned in that moment, affirming their choice. The path wasn't going to be easy, but it was the right path, and that was enough. In the days that followed, the protagonist witnessed miracles in their own life. Doors began to open where there were once walls. People appeared, offering help and support in ways they never expected. The road ahead still had challenges, but the protagonist was no longer afraid. They were no longer uncertain. They had the power of faith on their side, and with that, they knew they could face whatever came next. Have you felt the power of faith in your own life? The moments when everything seemed lost, and then suddenly, a sign appeared, a door opened, or a whisper of guidance showed you the way. These are the moments that shape us, that guide us toward our true purpose. Like and subscribe to stay with us as we walk through these challenges together. The journey has only just begun. As the protagonist continued their journey, a sense of purpose began to settle deep within them. but it was not as clear as they had hoped. The divine mission they had been called to was still unfolding, like a story with many pages yet to be turned. They knew that the Source had called them for something far greater than themselves, but the exact nature of that calling remained elusive. It was as though they had been given a piece of the puzzle, but the rest was hidden in shadow, waiting for them to discover the bigger picture. The protagonist had moments of clarity, fleeting moments when the veil seemed to lift and they caught a glimpse of their true purpose. These were the moments when the weight of the calling felt light and full of promise, but they were also the moments when doubt crept in. Was this really the path they were meant to walk? Or were they just imagining it all? It wasn't until a particular day, one that began like any other, that the protagonist received the revelation that would change everything. It came in the form of a vision, vivid and overwhelming, like an intense flash of light in the darkness. They had been meditating in the quiet solitude of the woods when it happened. The air around them seemed to shift, the rustling of the leaves becoming a distant hum, and a light enveloped them, a soft, golden light that radiated warmth and peace. In that moment, the protagonist felt a profound shift within them. It was as though they were no longer in their own body, but instead part of something far larger, a cosmic presence, the very essence of life itself. They felt their consciousness expand, connecting with something eternal, something beyond time and space. It was a feeling of pure connection, of oneness with the universe. The voice they had heard before, the voice of the Source, whispered once again, this time clearer, more certain than ever before. You are meant to merge with the Source. You are a vessel for divine energy, a channel through which the light will flow to heal and awaken others. Your purpose is not just your own, it is intertwined with the greater good of the world. You are here to bring change, to ignite the spark of transformation in others. Your mission is to act selflessly, to align your actions with the divine will, and in doing so, you will help others awaken to their own true purpose. As the vision faded and the light dimmed, the protagonist was left standing there, breathless and awestruck. They had received the revelation they had been searching for, the truth they had been seeking. Their divine purpose was to be a channel for the Source, to serve as a beacon of light in a world that desperately needed it. They were not meant to lead a life of personal gain or glory. Their path was one of service to the greater good, to humanity, and to the divine energy that flowed through everything. This revelation did not come with all the answers. It was not a neatly packaged message with a clear blueprint for success. Instead, it came with the understanding that the journey was ongoing, that the purpose would continue to unfold with each step, each decision, and each act of selfless service. The protagonist had not been called to fame or fortune. They had been called to something far more profound, to embody the divine will, to act as a conduit for the Source, and to trust that by doing so, they would fulfill their purpose. In the days following the revelation, the protagonist began to feel a shift within themselves. They noticed that their connection to the Source was growing stronger, that the wisdom they sought was now more easily accessible. Their intuition sharpened, and their insights became more profound. They could sense the needs of others before they were spoken, and they found themselves offering guidance and comfort without fully understanding how they knew what to say. It was as though the divine energy they had connected with was now flowing through them, guiding them in every moment. The protagonist began to realize that their purpose was not just about grand gestures or dramatic acts of heroism. It was about the small, everyday choices that aligned them with the Source. It was about choosing kindness when faced with adversity, choosing patience when frustrated, and choosing love when fear threatened to take hold. Every decision, every action was an opportunity to align with the divine will and to act selflessly for the greater good. As they continued their journey, they began to see how the world around them responded to this new energy. People they encountered seemed to sense the shift within them, drawn to their presence in ways they couldn't fully explain. There were no miracles, no grand displays of power, but there was something unmistakable in the way people felt at ease in the protagonist's presence, as though their mere existence was a reflection of the divine energy flowing through them. The protagonist's faith, once shaky and uncertain, was now a firm foundation. They no longer questioned their worthiness or their mission. They understood that they were a vessel for something much greater, and by aligning their actions with the divine will, they were fulfilling their purpose. The Source was not something distant or unreachable. It was within them, around them, and it was guiding them every step of the way. They began to see the challenges they faced as opportunities for growth, moments where they could deepen their connection with the source. When doubts arose, they turned inward, trusting that the answers would come. When obstacles appeared, they saw them not as roadblocks, but as tests that would strengthen their resolve and their faith. They realized that every trial, every hardship, was part of the process, a necessary step on the path toward fulfilling their divine mission. In this new understanding, the protagonist felt a sense of peace and purpose that they had never known before. They were no longer searching for meaning or wondering if they were on the right path. They knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that they were exactly where they needed to be. The source was within them, guiding them, and their purpose was clear. They were here to serve, to channel divine energy, and to help awaken others to their own purpose. And as the days passed, the protagonist's mission began to take shape. They began to seek out opportunities to serve others, to offer guidance and support, and to share the divine wisdom they had received. The more they gave, the more they received. The more they aligned their actions with the source, the more they felt connected to the greater good of the world. The protagonist understood now that their purpose was not a singular event or a destination. It was a lifelong journey of growth, of service, and of connection. They were constantly evolving, constantly deepening their understanding of their mission, and constantly striving to align their actions with the divine will. Are you discovering your divine purpose too? Have you begun to feel the stirrings of something greater within you? It is a journey that is not always easy, but it is one that is worth every step. The path may be long, and the challenges may be great, but with faith, trust, and alignment with the source, anything is possible. Hit the like button and subscribe. This journey is only beginning, and we are walking it together. The journey had been long and full of wonder, but it had not been without its challenges. The protagonist had learned to trust in their connection to the source, had discovered the strength that lay within them, and had begun to fulfill their divine purpose. Yet, despite the growth they had experienced, there was still something looming on the horizon, something they could not ignore. As they continued down the path, the air seemed to shift, and with it came a sense of unease. It started as a subtle feeling, a whisper in the back of their mind, but as the days passed, the feeling grew stronger, more insistent, and soon it became impossible to ignore. Doubt, fear, and temptation began to creep into their thoughts, clouding the clarity they had gained over the past months. The deeper they ventured into their mission, the stronger the forces of darkness seemed to push against them. It was as if the world itself was conspiring to test them, to pull them off course, and into the shadows that had once held them captive. The protagonist began to encounter situations and figures that sought to derail them from their divine path. One evening, while travelling through a desolate village, the protagonist was approached by a man who exuded a sense of authority. He was charming, persuasive, and spoke with a voice that felt almost hypnotic. "You've been walking a long path," the man said with a knowing smile. "But what if I told you there's an easier way? A way to achieve all the things you've ever wanted without the struggle, without the sacrifice?" The protagonist felt a pang of uncertainty. The man's words were tempting, so easy, so smooth. The promise of an easier way, of success without the hardships, pulled at them like a powerful current. The temptation was real. For the first time in their journey, the protagonist found themselves wondering if they had been wrong all along. Could they really fulfill their mission by walking this hard and uncertain path? Or was the man right? Could they achieve greatness without the pain, without the suffering? For a moment, the protagonist hesitated. The darkness had found its way in. The temptation to take the easier road was alluring, but deep down, they knew it wasn't the path they had been called to walk. Still, the doubts lingered, like a shadow hanging over them. They had been on the road for so long, and the weight of the journey was starting to wear them down. Was it possible to just take the easy way out and still fulfill their mission? As the man's words echoed in their mind, the protagonist felt the familiar stirring of their inner conflict. It was a battle they had fought before, but this time it felt different, darker, more dangerous. It wasn't just a battle of logic, it was a battle for their very soul. But then, in the stillness of the night, the protagonist remembered. They remembered the voice, the guidance, the connection to the source. They remembered the truth they had felt deep within their being when they first received their calling. The voice hadn't said that the path would be easy. It had said that the journey would be difficult, but it was the only road that led to true fulfillment, to true alignment with the divine. The protagonists stepped back, feeling the weight of the man's temptation slowly fade as they reaffirmed their commitment to the divine path. They knew they could not stray from it. It was the only path that would lead them to the purpose they had been called to fulfill. They turned away from the man, resolute in their decision. But the darkness was not so easily dismissed. The doubts continued to haunt them, growing louder as they travelled further into the wilderness. It wasn't just external temptations they faced. It was the darkness within themselves. The fear of failure, the fear of not being good enough, the fear of never truly being able to merge with the source. They were all still there, lying dormant in the corners of their mind, waiting for the right moment to strike. And that moment came. One night, while alone in the forest, the protagonist found themselves overwhelmed by the weight of it all. The path had become more treacherous, the signs less clear, and the doubts more consuming. They knelt beside the campfire, tears streaming down their face as they cried out in frustration. "Why is this so hard?" they whispered into the night. "I thought I was chosen for something great, but maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm just fooling myself." The darkness was suffocating, the weight of their own limitations pressing down on them. The temptation to give up, to turn back, to walk away from the calling felt more real than it ever had before. But in the stillness of the night, just as they were about to give in to despair, the voice returned, soft but strong. "You are not alone. You have never been alone. Trust in the source, and you will find the strength to overcome." It was a reminder, a gentle but unwavering call back to the truth. The protagonist realized that the struggle was part of the process, that the doubts and fears were not obstacles to be avoided, but tests to be faced head-on. They had always known that the road would be difficult, but it was in facing the darkness, both within and without, that they would truly merge with the source. With renewed strength, the protagonists stood up, their hearts still heavy but their spirit unbroken. The darkness would not claim them. They would not be led astray by the temptation to take the easy road. They were chosen for something greater, and no amount of doubt, fear, or external temptation could take that away. The inner battle had been won, but it was not the last. They knew that the darkness would return, in different forms, at different times, but they were no longer afraid. They had learned to trust in the source, to rely on the strength of their faith, and to understand that every challenge, every temptation was an opportunity to grow stronger, to align more deeply with their divine purpose. The protagonists continued their journey with a renewed sense of purpose and clarity. The shadows of doubt would always try to follow, but now they knew how to stand in the light of the source. They had discovered the power of faith, and with it, they would face whatever darkness lay ahead. Have you faced your own darkness? The fears, doubts, and temptations that seem to pull you away from your true purpose. These are part of the journey, tests that will shape you and help you grow stronger. Like, subscribe, and share your experiences with us in the comments. This journey is not easy, but it is worth every step. Stay with us as we continue to walk this path together. The darkness had tested them. It had challenged their faith, pushed them to the brink, and tried to convince them that they were not strong enough to continue. But the protagonist had emerged from the shadows stronger, more resolute, and more certain of their purpose than ever before. The internal battle had been fierce, but they had learned to trust in the source, to rely on the divine energy that flowed through them. As they continued their journey, they began to feel a shift, a deep sense of transformation that was beyond anything they had experienced before. It wasn't just that their faith had grown stronger, it was as though they were becoming something different, something greater. The struggle, the doubts, the temptations had all been part of the process, part of the divine plan to prepare them for what was coming next. They could feel it now, a growing connection to the source that was undeniable, a sense of purpose and power that was taking root within them. One day, as they stood on a hill, gazing out over the vast landscape that stretched before them, something incredible happened. The world around them seemed to shift, and they felt a surge of divine energy rush through their body. as if they were being lifted up into something far greater than themselves. It was a moment of spiritual rebirth, a moment when the protagonist truly understood what it meant to merge with the source. The light of the source poured into them, filling every fibre of their being with warmth, peace, and understanding. The energy was all-encompassing, flowing through them with a sense of divine purpose that they had never known before. They felt as though they were no longer just a person, but a conduit for something far greater, something that connected them to the very fabric of existence itself. It was as if the barriers between themselves and the divine had melted away, and they were now part of the vast, interconnected web of life. In that moment, the protagonist understood that this was the true purpose they had been called to merge with the source of all creation, to align themselves with the divine will, and to channel that energy into the world to bring about healing and transformation. The source was not just a distant, abstract concept. It was a living, breathing force that flowed through all things, and now it flowed through them. They felt the divine energy course through their veins, filling them with strength and clarity. It was as though their very soul had been awakened, aligned with the rhythm of the universe itself. They were no longer just an individual on a journey. They were a vessel for divine power, a force for good in the world. As the protagonist stood there, bathed in the light of the source, they felt an overwhelming sense of peace wash over them. The worries and doubts that had once clouded their mind were gone. There was no more uncertainty, no more fear. They knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that they were on the right path, that they had embraced their divine purpose, and that they were exactly where they needed to be. This was the transformation. This was the moment when they truly became the chosen one, when they fully understood the power that had been given to them and the responsibility that came with it. They were no longer just a person struggling to find their way. They were a conduit for divine energy, a channel through which the source could work in the world. As they continued their journey, they began to notice subtle changes within themselves. Their intuition had sharpened, and they could sense the needs of others before they were spoken. They could see into people's hearts, understanding their pain, their fears, and their desires. And with this newfound insight came the ability to help. The protagonist was now able to channel the divine energy flowing through them to heal, to comfort, and to guide others. It was not magic or miracles in the traditional sense. It was the simple power of love, of connection, of understanding. They began to see the world through new eyes. Where before they had seen only obstacles, they now saw opportunities to help, to share the divine wisdom they had received, and to bring light into places that had long been dark. They could heal broken hearts with a touch, lift weary souls with a word, and bring peace to troubled minds through a simple gesture of kindness. They understood now that their mission was not just about them, it was about the world, about bringing the source of all creation to those who needed it most. As the protagonist moved forward, they realized that they were part of something much larger than themselves. They were not just an individual on a quest. They were a piece of the greater puzzle, a vital part of a divine plan that spanned the entirety of existence. They were part of the flow of life, part of the energy that connected all things. The realization was humbling, but it also filled them with a deep sense of empowerment. They were no longer just wandering aimlessly, trying to make sense of their life. They had found their place in the world, and they knew that they were exactly where they were meant to be. This empowerment was not about gaining personal power or fame. It was about the ability to help others, to be a source of light in a world that often seemed filled with darkness. It was about becoming a vessel for divine energy, a force for good that could bring healing, love, and peace to the world. The protagonist knew now that their purpose was not just to fulfill their own desires. It was to serve others, to act selflessly, and to help those who were still lost, still searching for their own connection to the source. As they walked this new path, they began to encounter others who were on their own journeys, people who were still struggling to find their way. And in these encounters, the protagonist realized that they were not alone in their mission. There were others out there, people just like them, who were also being called to merge with the source and to bring about positive change in the world. Together they would create a ripple effect, spreading love, healing and light to every corner of the earth. The protagonist was no longer afraid. They knew that the road ahead would not always be easy, but they were no longer alone. The source was with them, flowing through them, empowering them to do the work they had been called to do. And in that power, they found strength, peace, and a deep sense of fulfillment. The transformation was complete. They had fully embraced their divine purpose, and they were now walking the path that had been set before them, ready to bring about the change the world so desperately needed. Do you feel the divine power within you? Have you begun to sense the calling, the energy that flows through you, ready to be channeled into the world? It's time to awaken. Like and subscribe to stay on this journey. Together, we will continue to walk the path toward our divine purpose, bringing light and love to the world. The journey is just beginning. The transformation was complete. The protagonist had embraced their divine purpose, merged with the source, and now they were ready to step fully into the life that awaited them. The journey that had once felt uncertain and overwhelming now felt like a calling that they couldn't ignore. The weight of the mission, the divine energy flowing through them, and the responsibility of the path ahead were no longer burdens to bear. They had become one with the source, and with that unity came an incredible clarity of purpose. The protagonist's next steps were no longer defined by doubt or confusion. They had moved past the internal struggles and fears that once held them back. The divine power that now resided within them gave them the strength to move forward with courage and confidence. They had become a vessel for divine light, and with every step, they were able to share that light with others. As they walked through the world, they began to notice how different everything seemed. The people around them were not just strangers. They were individuals on their own journeys, struggling with their own challenges, searching for meaning, seeking the light that the protagonist had found. With each person they met, the protagonist felt an innate understanding of their pain and their potential. It was as if the source was guiding them to these people, showing them where they could make a difference. The protagonist's mission was not about grand gestures or seeking personal gain. It was about helping others, guiding those who were lost, and spreading the light of the source in every interaction. Whether it was through a kind word, a gentle touch, or a piece of advice, they began to offer their support to those in need. They were no longer just walking a solitary path. They were walking it with others, and in doing so, they were fulfilling their divine mission. They understood now that their mission was not just for their own benefit. It was not about personal accolades or recognition. It was about service. The protagonist had been called to serve humanity, to bring about positive change in the world by acting selflessly and spreading love. It was through this service that they would fulfill their purpose. The source had not chosen them for their own glory, but for the greater good of the world. Every act of kindness, every moment of guidance, was part of the divine plan unfolding before them. As they continued to help those around them, the protagonist began to witness the profound impact of their actions. People they had helped began to transform. A lost soul found their way. A broken heart was healed. A mind that had once been clouded with doubt began to see the light of truth. The protagonist could see the ripple effect of their actions, how the light they had shared with one person spread to others, creating a chain of transformation that extended far beyond what they could have imagined. With each life they touched, the protagonist realized that their mission was never meant to be a solitary journey. It was about creating a legacy built on love, service, and the power of the source. They understood now that their mission was not about being a savior or a hero. It was about being a guide, a source of light in a world that desperately needed it. They were meant to help others discover their own divine purpose, to awaken them to the truth that they too were connected to the source, that they too had a role to play in the greater plan. As they began to build this legacy, the protagonists saw how their actions were transforming the world around them. Communities that had once been fragmented and divided were now coming together, united by the divine energy that flowed through them. People who had once been lost in darkness were now finding their way, guided by the light that the protagonist had shared with them. The protagonist had not set out to change the world in one grand moment. They had not sought fame or recognition. Instead, they had committed themselves to the small acts of love, the quiet moments of service, the gentle whispers of encouragement that changed the course of people's lives. And through these acts, they were building something far more powerful than they could have ever imagined. A legacy of love, a legacy of light, and a legacy that would continue to inspire and transform for generations to come. Their journey was far from over. The path ahead was still uncertain, and there would be challenges along the way. But the protagonist had come to understand that every step, no matter how difficult, was part of their divine mission. They no longer feared the unknown. Instead, they embraced it with open arms, knowing that they were walking in alignment with the source. They knew that their mission would continue to evolve, that they would face new challenges, encounter new opportunities, and help even more people find their way. But no matter where the journey took them, they were certain of one thing: their divine purpose was not a destination. It was a lifelong commitment to serving others and spreading the light of the source. The protagonist had begun to build their legacy, not through grand gestures or world-changing acts, but through the small, quiet moments that made all the difference. The light they had once found within themselves was now shining brightly in the world, illuminating the path for others to follow. Their story was just beginning. They had stepped into their purpose, and now they were walking it every day, impacting lives and spreading love wherever they went. The transformation they had undergone was not just for themselves, it was for the world. And the world, in turn, was being transformed by the divine power they had learned to channel. Your mission is waiting, chosen one. The world needs your light, your love, and your guidance. Just as the protagonist has found their purpose, you too are being called to embrace your divine mission. Like this video, subscribe, and join us as we continue this journey together. Your purpose is unfolding, and your divine mission is ready for you to step into. The journey has just begun. The journey of the protagonist has been one of incredible transformation. From the very beginning, they had felt the stirrings of something greater, an undeniable pull that led them to discover their true purpose. But along the way, there were moments of doubt, moments when the darkness seemed overwhelming and the path unclear. There were times when they questioned whether they were truly chosen for something great, or if it was all just a dream. Yet, through every challenge, through every trial, they found their way. They learned to trust in the source, to rely on the divine guidance that flowed through them, and ultimately, they embraced their divine mission with open arms. The protagonist's transformation has been one of moving from doubt to clarity, from fear to divine empowerment. They began the journey unsure of who they were, lost in confusion and overwhelmed by the obstacles in front of them. But as they faced their fears and trusted in the source, they began to understand their true purpose. They realized that they were not alone, that the source was always with them, guiding them, empowering them to become who they were meant to be. As they merged with the source, they became a channel for divine energy, and through this connection, they found strength, peace, and understanding. They realized that their mission was not just for their own benefit, it was to serve humanity, to bring light to those in darkness, and to help others discover their own divine purpose. The protagonist's journey was not just about personal growth, it was about service to the greater good, about fulfilling the divine plan that was unfolding in their life. Now, as they stand fully in their power, they are no longer the person they once were. They have embraced their true self, and through this transformation, they are becoming the light that guides others. They know that their mission is ongoing, that every day they have the opportunity to make a difference, to serve others, and to bring healing to the world. Just like the protagonist, you too are part of this divine plan. You too have a purpose, a calling that is unique to you. It may not always be clear right now, but just like the protagonist, you can trust that the source is guiding you toward your divine mission. You are not alone in this journey. The same divine energy that flowed through the protagonist is within you, waiting to be awakened. Your purpose is unfolding, and every step you take brings you closer to the truth of who you are and the mission you were born to fulfill. Don't let doubt or fear hold you back. Embrace your divine calling. Trust that the source is with you every step of the way, just as it was with the protagonist. Your journey is just beginning, and the transformation that awaits you is nothing short of powerful. You have everything you need within you to fulfill your mission and make a difference in the world. Chosen one, your mission is just beginning. Like this video if you feel inspired, subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts in the comments. Stay tuned for more of this divine journey as we continue to walk the path together. The source is calling you, and the time to embrace your divine purpose is now.